This is Steve Laffey's Fixing America. And now, broadcasting live from the Fixing America Command Center in Fort Collins, Colorado, here is your host, Steve Laffey.
Hey, good afternoon, America. Steve Laffey here. It's Laffey's LaffeyRadio.com. We're broadcasting from. We got a special show for you today. And by the way, to go back over some of the shows we've done, get lots of questions coming by email. Some people call me. I got, lots of different ways to reach me. But if you want to reach us, you can go on Facebook, which is great. And a lot of people can like us on Facebook, and people are doing that. You can ask questions on Facebook, and sometimes I'll put it part of the show. I'd like to do that because I'd like to hear from you before we got to take the studio at some point. I'm getting a little claustrophobic. Going to take it on the road at some point and go out and visit with people like I love to do. And we've started having guests. Early this week, we had our first guest on the phone, Dr. Smith out of Oklahoma. We'll get to him in a second. Some questions we've had about him, and we've got our first guest coming into the studio. And so we thought we'd do a show about some of the information we get coming back, the feedback from you, whether it's emails, phone calls, so forth. And I tried to sum this stuff up with you all, but go to LaffeyRadio.com. We just put out yesterday a new Fixing America Presents. It's a couple of minutes long. We try to shorten this show into a couple of minutes here and there, and we do a Laffey minute every day during the week. Another one went up this morning. That's about a minute 30. We do a little bit longer one with our green room. You can see part of the green room on the screen when Boss goes to the third screen, third camera. But we do that in a professional way. We get a great guy fixing it up for us and putting out some real information for you. And you should take a look at that. Those are the things I suggest that we pass around. I send them. I'll be doing a blast out to, many people in the next couple of days, and a lot of it be over some of the questions I've gotten in over time in the recent show that we had with Dr. Smith. So we're going to try to do a show today. It's not exactly Newsday Tuesday. It's more kind of like feedback from you rather than me saying, okay, here's what we got to talk about. Can take more than one subject per day. Of course, I think all these things that happen before the show, I'm thinking there's going to be one day where I'm just going to be sitting here and forget the show's good. I'm such in thought about all these topics. But so far that hasn't happened to me yet. And as a growing firm, we're going to make mistakes. I'm going to make them with the microphone. We're going to have some technical problems, but we're several weeks into this, we're getting that stuff worked out. We're happy. We know the website here at LaffeyRadio.com still works better than the government website for healthcare. So, and we didn't spend $1 million on it. We didn't spend $680 million on it. So there's a lot of things that happen in between shows. I was thinking yesterday, I am so cheap. It's like a Henny Youngman episode or a Don Rickles skit. But we were trying to figure out what to do with our bed, my wife and I. We inherited a bed when we bought this place. We inherited all the furniture at my house from a very nice man who sold us the property. But the bed was never that great. I mean, probably 15 years old. And I'm just I wouldn't buy a new bed. So, of course, whenever I splurge, I finally splurge on one of these Tempur-Pedic beds. They go up and down. I feel like an old man, like in a hospital bed or something. But they really are unbelievably good. But, of course, whenever I do that, or my wife and I do that, we decide that's a Christmas present. We can never actually buy things for ourselves. Like, we've done okay, we can go buy something. Can't do it. It has to be, last year we had these hats, a cowboy hat made up for her. Wonderful people up in Estes Park, Ted Williams. Colorado hats if you're up in Colorado. And, of course, that had to be her Christmas present. I got it for her in April. Now, in the end, we always get each other something else, although we don't really concentrate that much on Christmas presents. But it can't just be like we're going to go buy something. It has to be associated with a holiday, right, or a birthday, I suppose. Anyway, but back to what we're doing here today. Some of the stuff we've gotten in. I thought the show about Dr. Smith. Now, if you hadn't seen the show, go to surgerycenterok.com. Surgery Center OK for Oklahoma. He's in Oklahoma City. And we've gotten questions in about, they enjoyed the show. One guy called me, my buddy Bill. Can his efforts be duplicated in other cities and states? And what's holding all that up? Keep up the good work, blah, blah, blah. It's a very, very good question. Dr. Smith went through how hard it is and probably not even making as much money as he could do in something else, but how hard it is to get one of these things set up. Because the way our forget about Obamacare for a second. The way our system works is simply that you need the certificate of need. You have to show we can't just show up and start operating on people. No matter how much money we get it from Warren Buffett, we just can't show up in any state. Now, Oklahoma probably is more lenient than Massachusetts about who can operate, and maybe but it's hard to do. I also think that one of the ways we can help Dr. Smith, though, and I that's why I'm going to repeat this, and I'm going to send out a blast about this soon, is that we can help Dr. Smith just by knowing he's there. If you go to his website and you see all these operations that are so much less money, you don't have to go see the guy. I'm not trying to take business away from him. You can just force your doctors, your insurance companies, to start competing and spread the word around, especially among companies that are large enough to self-insure, or at least up to a certain point, because they can start sending people there. So I don't know. I don't have a good answer for that. Why are people not doing this around the country? But I think, one, he's on a different mission. He puts up with a lot of guff. It takes a different type of person to do what he's doing, to really on a mission to help fix America in his own way. He simply won't take money from the federal government. Never has, never will, it looks like. And you can make a lot more money in some ways by, as he explained, by taking money from the federal government through the insurance companies and Medicare, Medicaid, and so forth, and driving up your costs, which you get to keep more of. His cost level is very low. Doesn't have a lot of the administrators. So anyway, that's my take on it. But if I was going back to the private sector to make money, this might be something I try to roll up. Get people to do this and roll this stuff up and really get to drive costs down. This is going to help drive costs down, especially if we use it. I'm going to use it one day. If I need an operation, as it's an emergency room where I don't have a choice, I'm going to use it. So that's one subject that we've gone over. Another one, and I get this all the time, and it's not so much in emails, so forth, but it's questions I get from people I talk to, and but it's about J.P. Morgan and the banks. And I just wanted to go over what literally happened. I guess it's yesterday, but really today in the news. We talked about J.P. Morgan being too big to fail. We put out Laffey Minutes on it. We put out a Fixing America Presents on it. We've done a whole show on it. It's not attacking, by the way, just Jamie Dimon, who runs. We have nothing against him personally. But look at the year they've had. And I wanted to go over this with you because we talked about it, but it's a great article summing up. They're now down $20 billion in settlements, $1 billion this year. And some of them are just absolutely incredible. Forget about the $13 billion, of which $7 billion will be tax deductible. But some of them go back to things like, basically their advice bankrupted a county. Jefferson County, Alabama, went bankrupt, and they agreed to forgive the debt owed to them of $842 million in June over the advice and the deals that were done by J.P. Morgan that directly led to the county's bankruptcy in 2011. This one I don't think I knew about. There were settlements about wrongful home foreclosures. And to add up their company's legal bills, just for the third quarter, it came out that their legal bills were $9 billion. $9 billion. And this just goes on and on. So my when people ask me about this, and eventually we'll get some call-in stuff going here too, but to sum it up, what else do you need to know? I mean, how strong is their lobbying effort with what they do with their board of directors that Jamie Dimon is even in his job? And I just saw this week, is this the bottom for J.P. Morgan? What do you mean the bottom? The stock's near an all-time high. So they've been able to do away with like half their earnings and put this behind them. And what the American people, I know, are simmeringly outraged about. It's simmering. But there's no real true outrage where people are demanding that some people who have helped take down our economy actually spend time in jail. I'm not saying anybody in particular, but somebody has been involved in making fraudulent loans. And back in the 80s, they put thousands of people in jail. And I'm thinking about having a guest on. There's some people I'd like to have on about this. There's a guy named Black, a professor at Southwest Missouri. And I'd like to get him on the show to tell us, what can we still do about this? Why is the Justice Department not acting on this? And so forth. So anyway, we there's a lot to talk about. I want to get across those two things because I get talks about that for some shows we've done. What were some of the other ones here? We got Oh, here's one too. That, by the way, some people, when I start giving out my policies, and people go online, they see that, and they go look me up. So you can look me up, and I don't explain myself, my whole history. I think we did the initial show, but I don't go into everything that's happened to me in my whole life in the show. The show, Laffey Radio, we're just trying to point out. Most days we take on one topic, and we just go after that one topic until we drill down as far as we can drill, and try to get specific solutions about things. Today, we're taking some of your input on some shows that I've done or things about me. Here's one, it comes in all the time, but it comes in like this. That people, they look me up on the internet and see that although I have a show where I go after both Republicans and Democrats, or after nobody, or there doesn't seem to be an angle here. And I'm like, no, we really don't have an angle. Well, but my background appears to be much more of a Republican than a Democrat. And in some ways, I guess that's true. I grew up in the Reagan era, 18 years old. I remember how bad it was under Jimmy Carter. My family is not so much Republican or Democrat, my mother and father, except that they were ardently pro-life. But my father was a fairly conservative guy. But to go back to 2006 to kind of go through what happened, I had been an elected Republican as the mayor of Cranston for 2 terms, been reelected in a heavily Democratic town, a city that basically gone bankrupt, that we had helped turn around, fought major battles with public sector unions, had a primary every time I ran, for reelection, the only time I ran for election, and the time I ran for the U.S. Senate. And in 2006, I would just steer people toward my book, and I almost never talk about it. You can go to stevelaffey.com for the book. But my history with the Republican Party is that they didn't want me. And we could go through a whole list of circumstances as to why that could possibly be true. It's hard to make sense of, I know. So if you're out there and you say, why would they support Lincoln Chafee? Not just support Lincoln Chafee, who's now the Democratic governor of Rhode Island, in a place that, along with New Jersey, I guess, is still the worst run place in America. Worst place to do business. The 2 worst places to do business are, one has a Republican governor, Chris Christie, and one has a Democratic governor. But he was the Republican U.S. Senator. And so I suggest you go to the book, because the stories in the book are all true, in particular the one where I go down and visit with Liddy Dole, and I'm getting ready to run, and I haven't announced. And I have conversations with Ken Melman, who's running the Republican Party, and Karl Rove's a special executive. He didn't call me, but his name was Sarah, I think, called me. Then you've got Mark Stevens, who's the senatorial campaign head for Liddy Dole, and you have Liddy Dole. All of them trying to talk me into running for lieutenant governor. None of them really let me know what's exactly going to happen. And in the end, when I run, they not just defend Lincoln Chafee, but viciously attack me. And I'm a sitting elected Republican. In fact, second or third highest ranking Republican. This is not to say a lot in Rhode Island. It's not like you're talking about Texas. There's the governor, there's the mayor of Warwick, the mayor of Cranston, I guess your minority representative Watson. There's several Republicans around, and I'm one of them. So they just simply, they couldn't find a lot good to say about Lincoln Chafee. Obviously, he's now he was a true liberal Democrat. So it became a situation that, to know a little bit about me, that I just went through, and they pulled out all the stops to defeat me, and they did. The Republican Party defeated me, not Lincoln Chafee. We were swamped Lincoln Chafee. And there could have been much better strategies, but the Republican Party, National Party, really hasn't learned much since then. Go back to the most recent election of the governor of Virginia, where the Republicans pull all their money out so Cuccinelli can lose. He loses by 2 points when he could have won. Means they're still not thinking straight about how to run things. So anyway, we got to take a quick break. We're going to come back and talk about another question I get. Why don't we do something about Benghazi? We'll come back with a clip about Benghazi, and we won't do a whole show on it. We'll talk about Benghazi, but it's Steve Laffey at LaffeyRadio.com. Steve Laffey's Fixing America. Check us out at Facebook at Laffey Radio, and we'll be right back.
Stay tuned. Steve Laffey's Fixing America returns after these commercial messages.
The call to serve. It has no sound, yet I have heard it in the whispered retelling of honorable sacrifices made by those who have served before me. The call to serve has no form, yet I have clearly seen it in the eyes of men and women infinitely more courageous and more driven than most. The call to serve has no weight, yet I have held it in my hands. I will commit to carry it close to my heart until my country is safe and the anguish of those less fortunate has been soothed. The call to serve is at once invisible and always present. And for those who choose to answer the call, for their country, for their fellow man, for themselves, it is the most powerful force on earth. America's Navy, a global force for good.
Students, when I call the reason for your absences throughout the years, please exit the auditorium without your high school diploma. Too tired, family trip, sick day, starting the holidays early.
Starting in the 6th grade, students who miss 18 days or more of school in a year for any reason will fall behind and risk not graduating high school. How many days of school has your child missed this year? Absences add up. Keep track at boostattendance.org. Brought to you by the U.S. Army and the Ad Council.
I'm in almost every school bus and classroom. I go to school with your children. We say the Pledge of Allegiance together. You see me around the neighborhood and you tell me that I'm a pretty good kid. Well, I'm one out of every 5 children in America, and I'm struggling with hunger. This problem is closer than you think. My teacher tells me we can grow up to be whatever we want. I want to grow up to be someone who doesn't go to bed hungry.
There's enough food in this country to feed everybody.
Please visit feedingamerica.org today and find your local food bank for ways to help. Every dollar you donate helps provide 8 meals for kids like me, quietly struggling with hunger. Together, we are Feeding America, brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
And now, back to the Fixing America radio program with your host, Steve Laffey.
New revelations about the Benghazi attack. Yep, before he died, Congressman Bill Young met with Benghazi survivors and learned about details about the attack. Fox has now gained permission to air what he said.
They emphasized the fact that it was a very, very military-type operation. They had knowledge of almost everything in the compound. They knew where the gasoline was. They knew where the generators were. They knew where the safe room was. They knew more than they should have about that compound.
All this is the Benghazi survivors who testified yesterday were required to sign non-disclosure agreements by the CIA.
Hey, Steve Laffey here. This is Steve Laffey's Fixing America. That's Bill Young, Congressman Bill Young, who recently passed away, but a clip from him trying to explain some knowledge he had gained about Benghazi. And I do get people coming in, and Benghazi's been a big topic. I will tell you this, that I had the great pleasure, and I think I've got to get him on the show, but over the spring, I had Captain Larry Bailey, former, I guess, U.S. SEAL, Navy SEAL. Great track record. You guys should all go to Special Operations Seeks. Special Operations Seeks is a great website, and he came to visit me, spent time with my family, and just was an amazing time to spend with him. And we can go through Benghazi. I'm probably not qualified to really go into all the details about Benghazi. That's why I probably won't do a show, and I still have probably more to learn. There's probably a lot we don't know. I mean, there seems to be an awful lot we don't know about Benghazi. But one of the things that struck me when Captain Bailey was with me was that, man, you just never leave. One of the things about our military, our great military, they do a great job. I mean, there's always problems and so forth in everything we do. But one of the things, especially with these guys who are serving overseas, so we never leave anybody behind. And these guys are convinced that to cover their butt, the president, the Secretary of State, Susan Rice, they just left everybody behind. I mean, they didn't go back in. There had to be another reason. I mean, first of all, Hillary Clinton, and I know people have talked about this, but her job is to keep these people safe. So if they weren't on a special mission, which is probably what they were on, they certainly weren't in an embassy. And they certainly weren't a consulate. You see the papers refer to this Benghazi situation as Christopher Stevens was in a consulate. It couldn't have been a consulate. It wasn't even a mission. It had to be a special mission. And so the cover-up is still, we live in America. And this cover-up is still going on, and it looks like it's going on forever. And it constantly looks like it's just fading away from the public view. But the special operation officers who have served our country diligently, they're not letting it fade away. And hopefully we can get to the bottom of it. But when you go through the timeline, and I remember this, maybe you all remember this, but when this happened, it was fairly immediate, and to go through the people, Christopher Stevens, our ambassador, it was Sean Smith, the Foreign Service Officer, 2 former U.S. SEALs, Glenn Doherty, and Tyron Woods. When they came out immediately and said it was because of some video, and we all went and watched the video. By the way, if it wasn't because of this Benghazi thing, that video was the silliest thing that I ever saw in my life. It wasn't even really a movie. If you haven't watched it, they probably took it down. And the guy who made it, I guess, got arrested for other reasons. They had to know it wasn't because of some video. There are many videos, anti-Islamic videos, that are on websites. People make movies that are anti-Islamic. They had one at the Great Western Conservative Conference in Denver. I was showing my movie, and the guy showing it in the other room was showing the anti-Islamic movie that was talking about the kids' homegrown jihad in America. I'm sure this would cause 10 riots over in Libya or in other places in the Middle East. If anybody saw it, of course people have seen it. So the silliness of this, I say silly, it's not the right word, absolutely untrue. The fact that still no one's resigned over that. That's the thing about Barack Obama. No one gets fired for websites. No one needs to resign over tragedies that are all in the making. It's a total cover your butt administration. Now, they got themselves stuck in this thing Obamacare where they really can't. It's too big. It's too big. It affects all of us. Benghazi actually affected some families, our military, the way we think about things. But when you go through the timeline of Benghazi, and I got out a little timeline here. And you look at what happened that night. I mean, in the very short version, they did have a Department of Defense ordered unarmed surveillance aircraft to reposition overhead of Benghazi. Literally within half an hour. Stevens called Hicks in Tripoli, that evening. We're under attack. It goes on. When you go on and just look at what happened over the next several months, how these guys died. 2 were smoke inhalation, they think, and 2 were attacked by mortar, 2 Navy SEALs. And you have Smith's mother, who died in the attack, saying that Rice told her face to face that it was a result of an anti-Muslim YouTube video, which we knew couldn't be true. Obama went on TV. We forget this. He went on Letterman and said that the anti-Muslim movie inflamed Muslims worldwide, giving extremists and terrorists an excuse to attack our embassies, including the consulate in Libya. But it's not a consulate. It's not a consulate. I mean, there's no protection in that building. Clinton appears before Congress. This is January 23rd of 2013. This is the amazing statement she makes. She argues that the root cause of the attack was irrelevant. Quote, "We had 4 dead Americans," she says. "Was it because of a protest or because of guys out for a walk one night and decided to go kill some Americans? At this point, what difference does it make, Senator?" Obviously, it makes a huge difference. It's almost like she's walking away from it. And, of course, she did walk away from it. She's going to try to walk away from it running for president. And I don't know if she'll be able to, although the press will be all in her favor. It goes on. Here's Gregory Hicks, a U.S. diplomatic official in Libya. "I think everybody in the mission thought it was a terrorist attack from the beginning." He says, "For there to have been a demonstration on Chris Stevens' front door and him not to report it is unbelievable. I never reported a demonstration. I reported an attack on the consulate." It goes on and on. I mean, it goes on. And today, to this very day, I just don't know if we'll get to the bottom of it because time fades. Issues come up. Other things happen, like Obamacare, which is not good for the president anyway. And I don't think we've ever gotten to the point, what were they really doing there? What were they really doing in Benghazi? It certainly wasn't a consulate, and it certainly wasn't an embassy. And we certainly weren't protecting our people. But leaving them behind so quickly and not sending the troops in when we know, I think pretty much we know, we could have sent them in and we should have sent them in, it's a tragedy. And I think what we don't understand all the time is how much this affects our military, how much all of this is affecting our military and our great military people. Because one of the things we know about the people in our military, they know and they think that the other guys have their back, that someone has their back. And even if it's bringing out the dead body from some battle, that they're not going to be left behind. And we simply left these people behind. And it never should have happened. So anyway, that's Benghazi. We got so many other things to talk about here. We got other questions that come in. And we could talk. Well, we'll talk about that later. After we got a break coming up. One of the other things I like to talk to you about, though, is it comes up a lot of times about China. And heck, we haven't played a clip yet. I'm going to play clip one. This is about China and U.S. banks, and what China's banks are doing in the United States of America. It's a little old, but I think it shows up the point.
China's state-run monolithic banks are set to cast longer shadows in the United States very soon. That's because the U.S. Federal Reserve says that this bank, the Industrial and Commercial Bank of China, China's largest, can now buy up a U.S. bank. This is the first time that this has ever been allowed. Basically, the U.S. Fed is saying that China's bank regulations are on par with those of the U.S.
And so now we get a situation that is developing with China that they're going to be involved in buying some of our banks. And it's getting to the point where, I get these questions all the time about China. In fact, I get questions about, hey, I can buy cheaper stuff. Why shouldn't I be able to buy cheaper stuff, Steve? And I can use the money and spend it on other goods that would be helpful to the people in America. Well, it's a much longer story than that, but it's something that we have to take. When you take a look at at communist China, and I get questions, why do you call it communist China? I think that's because I call it communist China, and I don't always call it communist China. But one of the reasons I want to call it communist China is so that we know what we're talking about. If we don't reframe the question about China, about what the serious nature of our disastrous relationship with China is, then people just think China's like Canada. And that's how it gets reported, that China is, buying into, the U.S. through its bank. The Fed now thinks that China's banks have all the same characteristics of our banks, which they don't. So we've got to refer to it as to what it is. And we don't need to call them names. We just got to know, and we'll do more shows on China. I think it's the issue of our day. I think, but much like what happened in the 30s when America was sleeping, we're sleeping about China. And so I think the American people see this, and polls show this, but it will not be in a newspaper on a daily basis, other than the stories that were approving, a while back, the first communist Chinese takeover of a U.S. bank. And do we really want that? You've got people like, and I'll run out of time in this segment on this, but you've got people like people who run UBS, United Bank of Switzerland's wealth management, who are pretty smart people. Would probably disagree with them on some things, but they're thinking that we might have to bail out Chinese banks. So we've got to refer to it as communist China. Anyway, we got more to talk about. We're going to be back. We'll talk a little about the fair tax. We'll talk more about China. We get a lot of questions in about the tax system. Anyway, Steve Laffey's Fixing America. We're at Laffey Radio. And the right way to send us an email would be laffeyradio@gmail.com. laffeyradio@gmail.com. We'll take a break. We'll be right back.
Stay tuned. Steve Laffey's Fixing America returns after these commercial messages.
Well, I finally did it. I opened a 401k.
What? Why? Just wait for the inheritance. We've definitely got a rich uncle somewhere. We're one call away from the winner's circle at the Derby, dinners with multiple forks, a vacation home in the country, using summer as a verb.
You don't actually think that, do you?
When it comes to financial stability, don't get left behind. Get tools and tips for saving at feedthepig.org. This message brought to you by the American Institute of CPAs, the Rhode Island Society of CPAs, and the Ad Council.
When I have an asthma attack, I feel scared. It's like tiny nails in the air poke my lungs. I start to cough. Sometimes my parents have to take me to the hospital.
Today, 1 out of 13 children suffer from some form of asthma, accounting for nearly 1/3 of all emergency room visits.
I feel like I'm choking. It's kind of like an elephant is on my chest. A little whistle sound comes out when I breathe.
But while your child may suffer from asthma doesn't have to make your child suffer. There are simple ways you can prevent your child's next attack. To learn more, log on to www.noattacks.org or call your doctor, because even one attack is one too many.
I feel like a fish with no water.
Brought to you by the EPA, the Ad Council, and this station.
I am an American soldier. I'm a warrior and a member of a team.
I serve the people of the United States and live the Army values.
I will always place mission first.
I will never accept defeat.
I will never accept defeat.
I will never quit.
I will never leave a fallen comrade.
I am disciplined.
I am disciplined.
Physically and mentally tough.
Trained and proficient in my warrior tasks and drills.
I always maintain my arms, my equipment, and myself.
I am an expert and I am a professional.
I stand ready to deploy, engage, and destroy the
enemies of the United States of America in close combat.
I am a guardian of freedom and the American way of life.
I am an American soldier.
I am an American soldier.
I am an American soldier.
There's strong, and there's Army strong. See what it takes at GoArmy.com.
And now, back to the Fixing America radio program with your host, Steve Laffey.
Mr. Kane, we asked our viewers to send in questions, and a number of them wanted us to ask about this subject. You say abolish the IRS and impose a fair tax, which is essentially a national sales tax of 23%. But the experts say to generate enough revenue, Americans would have to start paying taxes on new home sales. They'd have to start paying taxes on rentals. They'd have to start paying taxes on health care. And according to the experts, the practical effect of a fair tax would be a tax cut for the wealthy and a tax increase for the middle class.
Well, Chris, with all due respect, your experts are dead wrong, because I have studied the fair tax for a long time.
That's our friend Herman Cain, running for president in 2012, and it really took off. The campaign really took off about the 999 plan, and I guess he's being asked about the fair tax. A number of things in that clip. This is Steve Laffey. Steve Laffey's Fixing America. We're answering some of the questions we get in from you, and what we think about things. That we played that clip because I guess I think I did. I got to go back and play the show we did about the tax system. But maybe I never really said which one I like. Which one do you like, Steve? We did a show on the fair tax, the flat tax, the 999 plan. We did one on what we call it's called the purple tax plan by Larry Kotlikoff. And first thing I would say is that all of them are very similar. All of them are better than what we have now. All of them. It's light years better. All of them will jumpstart the economy. All of them will have, initial people going, oh my gosh, what am I doing now? But all of them will save us billions of dollars in hours, hundreds of millions of dollars in time, which is one of my pet peeves. It's the time on taxes that I spend in years when I have good years, when I have not so good years. It's so much time and effort. And then worry about the power of the IRS to come after you about something that you simply made a mistake on. Even with the greatest accountants, you're going to make a mistake. And without accountants, if you have a year they have something slightly complicated, it could be about taking part of your house for a home mortgage deduction. It could be a totally legitimate thing. There's so much stuff in the tax code that you may misread. I mean, TurboTax does probably a great job. Accountants do a good job. But the fear or the power of the IRS and how it affects our economic growth, is a huge topic. So which one? I probably think that the easiest one to pass is really the fair tax that's called the purple tax. That Kotlikoff has a number of things that appeal to Democrats that he points out. And so the other thing about this clip is that Chris, this happens all the time. It's a pet peeve of mine. I just got to go off on a side tag on this. He talks about experts say that you're wrong, and experts say we'll do this, this, and that. But he never mentions one of them. All the time, people get asked questions and say, well, experts say, you don't even know who they are. There can't be a serious economist out there that doesn't know that you can find a way to make these things revenue neutral. That if the country's taking in $3 trillion, then we can change our tax system knowing how it all comes in to a fair tax or a flat tax and take the fair tax, how much we spend on goods and so forth, and say, yes, the transaction to a new tax system will affect people differently. There'll be winners and losers. And by the way, with a fair tax, Herman Cain never came out and said this, but Kotlikoff does. But it's really actually a very big wealth tax. I mean, if you've got $1 billion, all of a sudden you pretty much have $850 million because you're going to be taxed on the spending. You have the money already, and now we're changing it to tax you on spending rather than income. And so, but it has to change. So I'd go for all of them, and I think. I know that Herman tried to do a vote on this thing where people voted. I'm not sure how successful it was. I'll have to check into it. I don't know if one tax system is preferred by the others. I've never seen a real poll. But I do know that the instant popularity of Herman Cain over this 999 plan, which was simply half fair tax and half flat tax or in between, and I think he'd probably rather turn it into a fair tax if he could. But he was trying to find something they could actually get passed or grab a hold of the American people that people couldn't criticize. And of course, the people who run the joint, the people who don't want it to change, they come out immediately. And they change the story immediately. And anyway, so that's my feeling on that. Also, I want to talk about Venezuela. And in Venezuela, I don't think, maybe it's a whole show. We talked about Venezuela at one point. I'm going to play you some clips now about Venezuela because I think it's important to know what's happened very recently with John Kerry and our Secretary of State. But here's clip 3, and this is the new president who's grabbing power, Maduro of Venezuela.
President Nicolas Maduro is now one of the most powerful leaders in Latin America. The Enabling Act was passed by Parliament, allowing Hugo Chávez's successor to pass stringent new laws without consulting Congress. He's promised to wage a war on corruption, and private business owners he believes are bent on destroying Venezuela's ailing economy. And in Bolivar Square, his supporters were jubilant.
It's a war between the elite and the poor. They have forced us to kneel down. They did whatever they wanted until President Chávez came. And now President Maduro continues to liberate us.
It's an unbelievable clip where somebody is actually saying that Maduro is continuing to liberate us as the country falls into this unbelievable inflation trap. And so I really don't get a lot of questions about Venezuela, but I do get like, hey, what's your take on the new leader in Venezuela? And my take is that there really is a hopeful sign that it's going to be so bad. It's so bad that their answer for price controls. We had price controls in the 1970s that didn't work. They were just within a republic and a democratic society. They were voted on and so forth, and there were things like odd and even numbered license plate days and so forth. What they're doing in Venezuela is actually going in and almost like ransacking retail stores. Forcing owners to lower their prices. That's their idea of stopping inflation rather than probably what they're doing with the money supply and increasing it at such a rate that their currency is sinking. But this is something that really no one's asked me about. But I had to go off on a tangent on this before the next break because this is not even making the front page of the news. I found some articles about this when I was looking up Venezuela. And just literally 2 days ago, John Kerry repudiates the Monroe Doctrine. And I want to get into as it pertains to Venezuela and other countries. John Kerry, the Secretary of State, we've had this thing called the Monroe Doctrine, which we oppose interference in the Western hemispheres from outside powers. It was 1812 23, Monroe's address, I think it was January 23, many of the countries down in South America, Central America, were shedding the yokes of some of the European powers. And we wanted to make sure that no one else came in, that we controlled this area. And so the Monroe Doctrine, as I know it, has been in force since then. It's something we've always been enforced. And by the way, the only time I think we've lost, it wasn't in Nicaragua where we forced them out. It was in Cuba where we partially lost. And we'll talk a little about this tomorrow. We'll talk about Kennedy's death and his life and so forth. But it was the Cuban Missile Crisis, where the missiles are coming in, but that power stayed in power. Castro stayed in power in our hemisphere. And we did kick out the Russians and so forth, but maybe there was some, but other than that, and one of the reason we want the Monroe Doctrine to stay in power is that we can't have, like is happening today, and I've seen videos of this, where some people coming across that border from Mexico aren't Mexicans. They're people who have bad thoughts about America, but they're from Islamic countries. They're from the Middle East. You know, they're terrorists. And so we've got to protect our borders, but we've also got to make sure that we have a situation with China trying to make friends with all the oil exporting countries. They want their power into South and Central America. And we can't have that. But here's Kerry on the Monroe Doctrine. And this really gets me. This could be a whole show one day, but he says at a dinner, in a speech to the Inter-American Dialogue, when people speak of the Western Hemisphere, they often talk about transformations that have taken place. But the truth is, one of the biggest transformations has happened right here in the United States of America. In the early days of our republic, the United States made a choice about its relationship with Latin America. Monroe, who was also the former Secretary of State, declared the United States would unilaterally, as a matter of fact, act as a protector of the region. He didn't actually say it that way, but the doctrine bears this name, asserted our authority to step in and oppose the influence of European powers in Latin America. It did. And throughout our nation's history, successive presidents, in fact, all the presidents, including Clinton, have reinforced the doctrine and made a similar choice. Today, however, we have made a different choice. The era of the Monroe Doctrine is over. People are clapping. Of course they're clapping. There's always probably a left-wing audience. And the relation we seek is that we've worked on hard to force is not about the United States' declaration of how and when it will intervene. It's about all our countries viewing one another as equals, sharing responsibilities, cooperating on security issues, adhering not to doctrine, but to decisions we make as partners. This is a total disaster. I mean, when you think it can't get any worse, you look up Obamacare, then you read that we've abandoned, and it's not even a front-page story. I mean, you can go to certain magazines and read about it, but it's not like, oh my gosh, what happened? We have a Secretary of State with the blessing of the President of the United States saying that we're not going to enforce the Monroe Doctrine anymore. What do people think? And we're going to do a show on foreign policy on Monday, just foreign policy. What are the people in China, Iran, Venezuela, Syria, Russia, North Korea? They're sitting there giggling. I mean, they're saying we're rising up against America, and they're letting us. So we now can go into these countries. We can negotiate better with them. We can undermine their countries, and America is not going to do anything about it. This is a total disaster for America. The abandonment of, and as it pertains to Venezuela, is that's the first place they'll go. They have a lot of oil. They want the contracts, and I think a lot of these people think Venezuela is the model. You know, if we can do this in Venezuela, we can do it in other countries. And then we'll get control. And then America, and by the way, once America wakes up, it'll be too late. That's what they really think. Anyway, it's a hodgepodge of topics today, but remember this, we can't abandon the Monroe Doctrine. Steve Laffey's Fixing America. We'll take a quick break. We're at LaffeyRadio.com. Send us an email at LaffeyRadio@gmail.com. And we'll take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Stay tuned. Steve Laffey's Fixing America returns after these commercial messages.
Picture this. Your next trip. Utah. 5 national parks. First, Zion. You're walking. The ground rises. The ground drops. The ground becomes water. Next, Bryce. You're riding a mule. You're riding a mule under giant orange drip castles. You are not dreaming. You will not forget this. On to Capitol Reef. Take the scenic route, the really scenic route. Take a path you've never taken and see the stars for the first time. Now for Canyonlands. You're riding a bike. You're riding a bike on Mars. Now you're riding the rapids. Class 2, Class 3, Class 4, Classic. Arches, 5:32 a.m. Some things are worth racing the sunrise for. The horizon lightens. You round the corner. Whoa. This is Life Elevated. The Mighty Five. 5 iconic parks, 1 epic experience. Plan your trip at visitutah.com.
This is Nnamdi Asamoah. I play football for the Philadelphia Eagles, but what I do off the field with United Way might be more important. I'm a volunteer tutor and mentor. Why? Because over 1 million kids a year drop out of school, and that's not okay. It takes 12 years to create a graduate, but it takes about the same time to create a dropout. And the difference between a child becoming one or the other could be me, or it could be you. Studies show that if we get to these kids earlier, their chances are better. And kids who read well by 3rd grade are more likely to graduate. So join me in United Way. Suit up and take the pledge. Become a volunteer reader, tutor, or mentor. Because when a child succeeds, we all succeed. Give, advocate, volunteer, live united. Take the pledge at unitedway.org. Brought to you by United Way, the Ad Council, and the National Football League.
I'm always up for a challenge. It's the feeling of accomplishment that drives me. And there's no better challenge than serving part-time in the Coast Guard Reserve. I protect my country, work with the best and brightest, I get great pay and benefits in return. The Coast Guard Reserve is important work. I get to serve my community, and it's always rewarding.
If you were born ready, there's a new challenge waiting for you. Learn about serving part-time at gocoastguard.com/reserve.
And now, back to the Fixing America radio program with your host, Steve Laffey.
The bad news is Rhode Island ties Nevada for the worst unemployment rate in the country, 10.2%. Things are so bad, state labor department laid off 67 workers, including about a third of the people who staff the unemployment call center. People who file for unemployment report that it takes over a month to get a response. Now, one thing the AP story did not mention is who runs Rhode Island. Liberals. The liberal governor, Link Chafee, routinely bashes conservative ideas like cutting taxes to attract business and grow the economy. Seems old Link just can't make good things happen in Rhode Island. Sadly, people who live there have to suffer the results.
Yeah, that's Rush Limbaugh. I was talking about my home state where I was born and where I governed, my home city. And I often get questions, new people coming in, but that clip really is about, no matter what I write, no matter what I do, I put something out there in the public, and it is always going to be. And now it's like, stay the heck out of Rhode Island. All you did was raise taxes. I mean, you can go read these things. By the way, they're not even on my website. They're just all over the Providence Journal and some of the other stuff I write, where people it's the same stuff. And then I think about that clip. That's Rush talking about that, it is an amazing thing to think about. It's sometimes just people won't change. No matter what. I mean, there was when I was the mayor of Cranston, we turned the whole thing around. And today you look at Rhode Island where the governor, I mean, he's very unpopular, but we've seen unpopular numbers for people in Rhode Island. The Congressman David Cicilline, who destroyed a whole city of Providence, became a congressman, and with a 15% approval rating, cha-ching, when they pulled the lever, 155-45 for re-election. So, but the attacks on me are usually about just now from the people in Rhode Island, even though we did a tremendous job, not people, just basically the public sector union people who are going to watch. This is going to happen in a lot of states. It's probably going to happen in Puerto Rico, where they're going to watch their retirements just go away. And I think we're going to have to do a whole show on that. This is something I know pretty well. I lived it, and I study it, and I know it. Whether it's state or local pension systems, we talked about Social Security. But these state and local pension systems are so underwater, and the drag on the economy for many communities, including my home, where I was born in Rhode Island, such a drag on the economy, but they simply won't change it. So very few people are making out like bandits, or relatively speaking, and the rest of the people continue to suffer. And it's just so sad. But let's the other things I get talked about. We've talked a lot about the Fed, and I'll tell you a little shocking thing happened today. But let me play a clip. This is and I also get asked too. A lot that I never and I really don't. When are you going to do a show about the stock market? I pick stocks basically as part of a living when I was in the private sector. I analyzed them. I taught the top finance course at the University of Rhode Island. It was a course about picking stocks. And but I never like to get involved. And you see people on TV, the stock market's going up, the stock market's going down. Nobody really knows. And so I hate to give my theories. I give my theories about stock picking from time to time, but not about where the market's going, because you really don't know. But but it's interesting to say, let's play. It's clip 2 here about the stock market and some of the thoughts we have on it.
Now, it may be very hard in the Philippines right now, and in the U.S., people on Main Street are struggling, but not the people on Wall Street. The Standard & Poor's 500 index has climbed 108% since Obama became president, adding more than $10 trillion in equity market value, and 24% just this year. But we need to understand that this is another stock market bubble. And we need to understand that this is not something that is helping people on Main Street. People are still losing their jobs, are still losing their homes. This is something that is helping Wall Street, and it's a big boom to K Street, to the lobbyists, to the Washington politicians who are getting paid by the big corporations, by the big banks, who are giving a pass on legislation that would have curbed in the abuses that led to the crash in 2008.
Yes, it is amazing. I will say this about the stock market. I mean, one of my friends sent me a great chart about this and asking me about stuff on the show. But you can just look at the money supply and the Fed assets, and you look at the stock market. There's a lot of correlation. This is just too much of a correlation for me to actually take it that seriously now. As far as being, I can analyze companies, but what they've been doing since 2008 is something foreign to everything that I learned and studied, went to business school and took classes in, and spent my career in, with trading stocks, analyzing stocks with analysts, running a research department, running a focus list. It was all about, for me, combining a top-down and a bottom-up approach. And bottom much being the micro, what's the company doing, and so forth. But then analyzing from the top down, the macro side, and putting them together, which I thought I was pretty good at. But I really don't know what to tell people now. We've had 3 sort of bubbles. We've had the internet bubble, fueled by the government, crash. The credit bubble, fueled by the government, by the Federal Reserve in particular, and lousy lawmakers, crash. And now we have the Bernanke QE3 bubble, QE to infinity. And now the thing that's happened today, there's some surprising things happened today. I did a whole show on Janet Yellen the other day, and I was shocked to see just about an hour before the show started, there was a vote out of conference on approving her, 14-8. So I looked at the vote, 14-8, to approve Yellen's nomination out of committee in the United States Senate. And by the way, just an hour before the show started, the Democrats decided to do what they call the nuclear option. Now, of course, you can't, when someone gets shot, you can never use any of these terms. But I guess we can still call it the nuclear option in the Senate, where instead of needing 60 votes to approve, appointments, they only need 50. So they just voted 52-48 for that. And that goes along with Yellen. But Yellen was approved 14-8. But look who voted against Yellen. Was one Democrat, Manchin, I can't say his name, Joe Manchin, a Democrat out of West Virginia, who's really a Republican. But then you've got 3 Republicans, Corker, who I see on TV out of Tennessee, Kirk, who I don't know that well, and unbelievably to me, Tom Coburn, voted in support of Janet Yellen. And so this comes at a time when the Fed, in today's paper, this is the top story today about the Fed, and I'll just get to a little bit how it affects stocks, but the Fed is casting around trying to find some verbiage and releasing minutes of the most recent meetings about how they're going to try to, they know now, I'm convinced that they know now they're in way too far, and they're going to try to find a way out. See, what the Fed has done is it used to be in charge of the short-term interest rates, using the discount rate, dealing with banks. Then it decided it had to control the whole yield curve, all the way out to 30-year bonds. It's So that's why they got involved in buying mortgage-backed securities and U.S. Treasuries and so forth and putting them on their balance sheet. But now they know there's no way out. And this is really incredible. This is why Yellen shouldn't be the Fed head. But it looks like, obviously, if she goes 14-8 out of committee, it's going to pass, and Republicans are going to vote for her. But the scenario getting the increased Fed attention is that the bond program is becoming ineffective for addressing the economy's woes. That's the discussion. And so what they're going to try to do, by the way, they say bond buying programs have, quote, drawbacks not associated with forward rate guidance. They're going to try to give more forward rate guidance and saying, hey, we're going to keep interest rates even lower at zero, let's say. This is because this is beyond zero. We're going to keep rates even lower for longer. In fact, they're going to stop putting out statements as they try to drain money out of the bonds that they've been buying, $85 billion a month. They're going to be saying we'll keep interest rates at zero until, say, 6% unemployment. And so the problem is going to be when this inflation kicks up at some point, and they still haven't gotten out of it, and they're not going to have the courage to raise the rates when inflation gets above 2.5%. And that could come, by the way, if it doesn't come, it's all because the banks still aren't lending, and we sit in this sluggish, tepid, disastrous recovery. And so we in America have a lost 5 years. We're out 10 million jobs that we should have back from this last recession, the financial crisis. We could be out another 5 more years before people come to their senses. And like Japan, which is trying everything they can do, deflating their currency, trying to get their people to spend more, everything they can do, it's still not working in Japan. They've lost 20 years. That's why they're not the second largest economy in the world. So we've got to get to the point where we take the medicine, you know? And so to see this happen in the U.S. Senate with the vote that they have, so she'll definitely get approved for nominations. I mean, it won't even be close. She'll get 60 votes probably, given what happened here. But to think that this is going to continue and that Republican U.S. senators are voting for Yellen, I mean, at least with Obamacare, at least there's, to their credit, at least there's no congressman or senator who voted for Obamacare. So it really becomes a real sticking point as this thing spins out of control, continues to spin out of control. As Democrats know, it's spinning out of control. But when it comes to the Fed, when this game ends, and it'll end badly, by the way, it'll end badly, but when you talk about 6% unemployment, what the public really doesn't realize, and the press doesn't report, is that once you get down to 5% unemployment, you're kind of at full employment. I mean, every 1 out of 20 people have left a job or gotten fired and are looking for another job, and they're unemployed. That's a normal thing in America. We don't all work for the Postal Service for 25 years. Most people change jobs, they move cities. We've made it increasingly difficult for people to do this. So we want to thank you for the information you feed back to us, whether it's phone calls, emails, so forth, and we want more of it. With Steve Laffey at laffeyradio@gmail.com. We're on Facebook. We'd love to see more. We'd love that you like us on Facebook. We'd love to see more comments on Facebook. And we'd like you to take the information we're sending out. Every day we're putting out new stuff about the solutions to America's problems in a very unvarnished way. We're not looking at it as a Republican or as a Democrat. We're looking at it as like, how do we fix these problems? And we need your help. So that's one of the reasons once in a while we'll stop and do a show like this. We'll take on different topics, take your interest in what you're talking about, and try to sum it up in a shorter viewpoint. Tomorrow, we're going to take time aside and talk about John F. Kennedy, who I would love to spend an hour on. It's the 50th anniversary since his assassination. And we're going to talk about his presidency, what it meant to America, what it led on to over the years to come, and how he's actually different than many of the liberal guys write about him and talk about him. But anyway, Steve Laffey's Fixing America at LaffeyRadio.com. Appreciate you tuning it in. Follow us on Twitter too at LaffeyRadio.com. And tomorrow we'll be back with another show. God bless you. Tuning out for now.
You've been listening to Steve Laffey's Fixing America radio program on the Laffey Radio Network. Fixing America is broadcast Monday through Friday afternoons at 3 p.m. right here at www.laffeyradio.com. Any rebroadcast, retransmission, or account of this broadcast without the express written consent of Laffey Network, LLC is prohibited.